Hello and welcome to another episode of the Beer Chronicles. Today we're going to be drinking Beck's. For anyone who hasn't seen any of these yet and don't quite understand what this is about, essentially what it is I have a poster up here that's covered in pictures of beers, and the smell I'm getting off that immediately. It's covered in beers, and that is a very, very old poster. I've had it for over a decade now, and it's starting to, the corners are ripping and fraying and whatnot, and I just need to get rid of it. So I'm going to throw it away. But I thought it would be fun, before I do that, to try every single beer that's on the poster. So that is my current task before I can, get rid of it. So far we've tried two. We've tried the Budweiser and the Corona Extra, which are two beers that I've already tried before in the past. But as I said in the first video, when sort of going through the rules of this, even if I've already tried them before, they still need to be chronicled in this series, as it were. So yeah, I'm still trying beers that I've already had before, and Beck's is another example of that. A lot of these earlier ones, because they're, I just went to the shop, got a collection of beers for this series, and the more mainstream ones are just there, easy to get, so I grabbed a few. So these first few are going to be ones that I've already tried. This is another example of that. That's a nice lager. That's nice. Beck's is pretty good. And basically what happens in these videos is I drink the beer, and then when the beer is drunk, the video is over. And whilst enjoying this, I just talk about whatever happens to be on my mind at the time. And in the first... bloody hell, what's going on with my voice? And in the first two videos, I sort of planned what I was going to talk about before going into it. The first video was me basically talking about this series and what it's going to be about going forward, and then I ended on a bit of a discussion about Dragon Ball GT because there was time left. Then in the Corona video I talked about what did I talk about? I talked about Devil May Cry 2, that was it. Sort of giving a defence of that game whilst still acknowledging that it's not great, but defending it somewhat. For this third video, I have come into this with no plan whatsoever. I haven't decided what I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to drink and talk about whatever happens to come to mind. So with that being said, what should we talk about? Let us talk about Star Wars. That's a franchise that loads of people can get behind. If you've tuned into this video, then you most likely know a bit about Star Wars and can understand things being said in this video. So let's go for that. Star Wars. We will specifically talk about the lesser liked films in the franchise. Let's start with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Definitely a film that was created for children to get into the series rather than appealing to people who are already fans of the original trilogy. It's essentially very clearly trying to bring a new audience into this new trilogy because they want a young audience, because they are the ones who buy the merchandise. So yeah, a lot of fans of the original trilogy don't like Episode 1, and understandably so. But when I saw it, I was a child, so I did love it. It's almost shameful to say now, but I thought Jar Jar Binks was funny. I think a lot of children my age did. He was aimed at my demographic, so, forgive me for that. I have since grown up and realised that he is a bad character, but because I have that fondness and nostalgia, I still don't hate him or the movie. I can still watch it and enjoy it. To me, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, is a worse movie than Episode 1. Episode 1 gets all the hate, but Episode 2 is the worst movie in my opinion, because Episode 1, it's fun in parts, and also has its bad things that stand out, and you can talk about how bad they are. Episode 2 doesn't have a lot to talk about, because it commits the biggest sin, in my opinion, of any movie, and that is that it's just boring. It's not great or terrible. It's just nothing. Most of the times when I watch that movie, I come out of it having almost no memory of what's gone on in the movie, because most of it is just there and it doesn't stand out in any way. Episode 2 is the worst movie, because you don't just come out of it with a negative emotion, you come out of it with no emotion whatsoever. Sometimes you don't come out of it awake. And Episode 3 was far, far better written. But the story feels rushed as you go through it, because you've got this whole sort of arc of Anakin turning to the dark side, and it happens way too quick. But I feel like that's not the fault of Episode 3, because Episode 1 and Episode 2 should have set up this turn to the dark side, and then left Episode 3 with the entire job to do. And, you know, it did it okay for what it was left with. But really, Anakin's turn to the dark side should have happened, should have began in Episode 2, and it just didn't do it. And even just having the starts of that, and I know there were things in there like when he slaughtered the Sand People, but that was the sort of thing where he did it and acknowledged that he'd done it, and then sort of learnt from that, and by the end of it he was still a Jedi, still a good guy, and there wasn't really any signs that, you know, that was going to play into the future, if not for the fact that we've already seen what happens to him in the future with the original trilogy. Episode 3 was left with the entire job of changing him from a good guy to a bad guy, and it happened way too quick, and it shouldn't have, because they knew from Episode 1 where they were going with it, and really, really should have set it up better than that. So yeah, Episode 3 has its problems, but most of those are because of what it was left with from the first two films, and I do think Episode 2 is the worst. And then we move on to the latest trilogy, the Disney ones, and I still think that Episode 2 is the worst, because the Disney films get a lot of hate, but they never get as boring as Episode 2. So for me, out of the main movie timeline, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, is the worst of all the movies. The Disney trilogy is not perfect, it has its problems, but I come out of each movie having, you know, enjoyed what I watched for what it is. Episode 7 is almost completely void of original ideas. It is pretty much just a rehash of Episode 4. By design, I feel it was basically trying to say, okay, we know you don't like what happened with the prequel trilogy. Here's the first movie of our trilogy, and we are going to affirm that we are going back to our roots and trying to make a film that feels Star Wars. And they did that by just recreating Star Wars. And the first time you watch it, or the first time I watched it, it was awesome, because, you know, seeing these characters who you hadn't seen for ages and having that feel of the original Episode 4 movie, it just brought back a wave of nostalgia, and you came out of that film feeling like you'd watched a Star Wars film and it was great, and then you watch it again and again and again, and then each time that feeling dies off, and you're just left with the plot, and you just think, huh, I'm just watching episode 4, except episode 4 did it better. So episode 7 isn't great, but it's still an okay movie. It's just not got any originality to it, really. Kylo Ren, awesome villain. Can't complain about him. I don't like, even from episode 7, I didn't like what they were doing with Rey. Even from the very beginning, it just seemed they were just making her too powerful without having earned it. That was very apparent even from the first film. Well, the first Disney film. Episode 9 we'll skip ahead to. That's one of those films where I feel it's probably the worst of the Disney trilogy. Because they basically said, yeah, we're fucked, so we're not even going to try. Rian Johnson, the changes he made to The Last Jedi, left them not knowing how to do episode 9. And instead of trying to actually write something good, they instead just went, we'll just find a way to bring back the Emperor and ride the wings of nostalgia to the bank. So in terms of being part of the overall narrative, the plot behind it, it's ridiculous. It really is. But some of the things that happen in there, some of the visuals, and the return of Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor is a fun enough watch that even though the plot is bullshit, I can still watch the movie and enjoy it. I enjoy it in the same way that you enjoy Tommy Wiseau's The Room. Okay? It's not good, but I enjoy it. It's like that, not to that extent. It's not like so bad it's good. It's not that kind of film. It's just, basically, I have fun watching it, but being part of the franchise, it stands out as not caring about the rest of the franchise. I think that's the best way I can describe it. And then we'll go to The Last Jedi. I like The Last Jedi. It gets so much hate. People talk about it as being the worst of the Disney trilogy, and I don't see how you can possibly think that after Rise of Skywalker. They talk about it as being the worst Star Wars film of all time, and I just talk about it as being one of the worst films ever, and it's really, really not. It's one of those things where, you got pissed off at it, so you overreacted. There are so many bad films out there. Just because this one didn't do what you wanted it to do doesn't automatically mean it's the worst movie ever made. Have you ever seen The Room? I mean, it's so bad it's good, but, if you concentrate on the so bad part, it's fucking terrible. Oh, I do love it, though. The Room's a bad example because it's one of those that... Can you call it a bad movie if you love it so much? But yeah, there are a plethora of movies out there that are just complete and utter dog shite. And to try and talk about The Last Jedi as if it's below all of those is just wrong. It's not. But even beyond that, it's not just not the worst movie. It's a good movie. I like The Last Jedi. I think it's pretty great. Some of the problems people have, and I can agree with this first point, is that they obviously had a sort of plan for what they wanted to do with the trilogy, but when Rian Johnson took over as director for The Last Jedi and they told him, this is the plan we've come up with, do what you want, but this is, what we thought would be good, he just sort of cast that aside and did his own thing, which, was his right to do. The producers didn't say, you have to do this. It's just like, here's our ideas, and he's like, no, I don't want to do that, and if you don't make him do it, then it's your fault rather than his. I do think the executives, the producers, should have had more control over the overarching story of the entire trilogy to make sure that the trilogy worked as a trilogy, instead of just doing what they clearly did, which was hiring talented directors to make each individual film as its own film, to try and just, okay, the old film's done now, forget about that, make a new film and, let that make money, and then once we've made all the money from that, we'll forget about it and make the next one and make money. And don't fuck with my Star Wars. Make a trilogy that has a plan from start to finish and stick to that and make some good fucking films. God. And this is the thing with The Last Jedi. As its own individual movie, it is one of the best movies in the whole of the Star Wars franchise, and I will defend that to the grave. But as being part of a trilogy, it does a terrible job, because it completely ignores everything that came before it. It sort of intentionally turns all of that on its head and says, you thought this was going to happen, but no this, and you thought this was going to happen, but no this. And that works at times in movies, subverting expectations, but it does it with everything, and that pretty much, that reaches the point where it shows no respect to what came before it. And then it completely, I'm trying to think of my phrases, it closes itself off in such a way that it doesn't set itself up much for the sequel. It's the middle film of a trilogy, and it has almost complete closure. So the next movie had to just sort of start from scratch. It was very difficult to follow on from. I do feel like Rian Johnson went into this as, instead of saying, I'm going to make the second film in a trilogy, he just went into it saying, I'm going to make a movie. And he made a movie, and I think he made a really, really good movie. But he just didn't seem to understand that he was making a movie in a collection of movies that should work together, and he didn't try to make it work with the other movies. And again, I don't know if that's particularly his fault, or if the executives just didn't care enough and basically told him to just make a movie because they wanted a movie to make money. I don't know. Anything that I come up with would be conjecture. I have no idea. But on its own, as its own individual movie, top-notch, one of the best in the franchise. I feel no shame in saying that. I think it is a great movie. People complain about the space battle, about some of the things that happen in there, and I don't really understand why. They say that like the bit where the one ship's going over the Star Destroyer and drops the bombs on it, and like, the bombs wouldn't drop like that. They're in space. No, they would. They would do that. If you just get an object and put it in space and let go, then yeah, it won't move straight down, whatever you consider down to be. But if you take it there and propel it down, then it will continue to go down. The ship flew overhead it's, safe to assume that it doesn't want to blow itself up. So it will probably thrust its bombs out towards the doorway. And because they're in space, it would continue to go down. That just makes perfect logical sense. And also, hovering right above a Star Destroyer, this massive thing close by is going to have the most effective gravitational pull on those bombs as well, which will only help bring the bombs in that direction, because, that's how gravity works. When you're in space, it may not, seem like, because you have no frame of reference visually around you, that you're being pulled towards anything, but you're always being pulled towards something. And you sort of have to calculate the size of all the things around you and the distance you are from them, and from that work out what's got the most gravitational pull on you at that moment in time, and you will be pulled towards that thing. At that point, the bombs would have gone where they went. It's absolutely fine. It makes perfect logical scientific sense, and it looks awesome. So that gets a pass from me, Ryan. That being said, it does have its problems. Trying to teach Poe a lesson by not telling him the plan and expecting him to just go along with orders because that's his job, I can understand. Yeah, they wanted to get that message into him, saying, you've been demoted, you need to learn that you have to do as you're told. But at the same time, you could have just told him the fucking plan. And if you told him the plan, then he would have gone along with the plan. But no, you chose to be an absolute twat about it. Things like that are a problem. It's not a perfect movie, but I still think it's a great movie. The scene with Snoke, where Rey and Kylo are there and Snoke basically gets taken down. I love it. That was one of those moments where they subvert your expectations in a way that I feel works, because you really, really don't expect it, and then it happens and it blows your mind at the time. And a lot of people seem to think that because episode 7 basically mimics episode 4, they say, okay, because people expected episode 8 to mimic episode 5 a bit more, instead of doing it for good storytelling, Rian Johnson just killed Snoke to completely counter what you expect. Episode 5 ended on this note of the villain overpowering the hero, and he almost died from that. And then they basically end on this down note of, what the hell are we going to do from here? They are way more powerful than us, and we are just... And then episode 8 has the sort of approach to Snoke, who you could say mimics the Emperor in the way that Kylo mimics Darth Vader, which in the original trilogy, this scene, as it were, wouldn't have happened until episode 6. So not only is this happening now instead of later, but then Snoke gets taken down, and that's surely a episode 9 thing, not an episode 8 thing. And people seem to think, yeah, he's just doing that because it's the opposite of what we expect. And they think that that makes it feel very un-Star Wars, because that's not what the original did. But I would argue that in a way, it is what the original did. And I'll explain myself. The original trilogy set a lot of movie tropes that weren't tropes at the time, but then later became tropes. One of the classic examples is Darth Vader saying, "I'm your father." It's the sort of twist. Oh, the villain is the hero's father or some sort of relative to the hero, linked to the hero in some way, in a way that you didn't previously know. It's become such a big movie trope now that you sort of expect it going in. If the villain doesn't reveal that they are linked to the hero in some way, then it almost feels incomplete and wrong. But at the time when Star Wars Episode 5 came out, this wasn't the case. It was a big reveal at the time, and it was so surprising and big that after that film came out, loads of other films started to use it, and it became a trope. And Star Wars did that with a lot of things. Star Wars set a lot of trends. So having the movie end with this sort of big reveal, and then to have the hero become overwhelmed, overpowered, and to leave it on this down note of the Empire is winning and it's going to take so much for you to come back from it. At the time when Episode 5 came out, this was groundbreaking stuff. And it set the bar for what the middle movie of a trilogy should do to set up the next movie to rise from where the movie before had made it fall. And it worked so well, and it's a fantastic way to do it. And obviously, as a result of that, other movies started doing it. And so, because Star Wars kind of set this up, and because The Last Jedi is the middle movie in a Star Wars trilogy, it feels wrong when it doesn't follow that. But what you've got to remember is, at the time when Star Wars first introduced it, it was subverting expectations. Episode 5, the ending to that movie was very, very groundbreaking for its time. It went against the code. And Episode 8, going against the newly established code that has been established since the time of Episode 5, is basically, it's not repeating what Episode 5 did in terms of plot. It's repeating what it did in terms of changing cinema. You expect the fall of the heroes and the rise of the villains in the second movie of the trilogy to give the heroes a mountain to climb and overcome in the final movie because of Star Wars. And because you expect it to then not follow that formula is a shock. That shock, that surprise, hits hard when you don't expect it. And that's what Episode 5 did. It gave you something you didn't expect that subverted expectations and hit hard. And Episode 8 did the same thing. It just achieved it through the opposite means, because Episode 5 made it so that you had to go the other way in order to achieve that. It's sort of, both Episode 5 and Episode 8 went against the current cinema of its time to bring you a surprising, shocking ending. And in doing so, both of them being Star Wars films, has brought the whole of cinema full circle. I think it's very fitting that it happened in a Star Wars movie, and I do think that Rian Johnson, I believe that he knew that going in and did do it as a fan of the original. It very much feels to me like he was trying to mimic the effect of Episode 5 rather than the plot of Episode 5. And because a lot of people who go to the cinemas nowadays and went to the cinema to see Episode 8 are too young to know what movies were like before the original Star Wars trilogy. So they don't realise just how groundbreaking it was. They see movies nowadays that follow the trends of original Star Wars and just feel this is what movies are and what they've always been. And so it's sort of too much of a shock for them, and they feel like, you know, you're just doing this because movies don't do it. But movies don't do it because of Star Wars, and to then do what movies don't do is a very Star Wars thing to do, because it's Star Wars that originally did it. And I think once you take a meta step back and look at it from that angle, you can understand a lot more what Rian Johnson was trying to do with Episode 8. And it does, you know, when you've got that understanding, you can look on it a lot more favourably and think, actually, that's kind of brilliant. And in its own way, even though the story is the exact opposite of Episode 5, it's still a perfect homage to Episode 5, the fact that it does that. A lot of people hate the ending, but it is one of the reasons that I love the movie so much. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I went to see that movie in theatres with my brother, and when we came out, I was gushing over it. I was like, that was absolutely fantastic. And I stick by that to this day. I think Episode 8, The Last Jedi, is an amazing movie. It has a lot of love for Episode 5 that people don't realise. But it is there, you just have to know where to look for it. But again, the biggest problem I have with Episode 8 is that it has no regard for the trilogy it's in. It has, you know, no regard for what came before it in Episode 7, and it doesn't care where it leaves Episode 9. It just focuses on itself and tries to be its own good Star Wars movie. And when that is the sole focus of the director, he achieves it very, very well. But there were other things that he should have also focused on. And that is where it falls. It fails as part of a trilogy, but works as its own standalone thing. And I feel that is the case with the entire Disney trilogy, really. The Episode 7, not so much. It works on its own as a homage of Episode 4, but also did leave it so that it could be continued. Episode 8, as we've just discussed, completely disregards everything else. And then Episode 9, because of where Episode 8 left it, sort of had to do its own thing. And so as such, when you watch Episode 9, it doesn't feel like part of a trilogy. It just feels like its own... It feels like its own fan-made movie, really. It's got these, you know, these moments, these callbacks. It's got the Emperor in it again. He's shooting lightning out of his hand so powerful that it goes across a sky full of Star Destroyers. And you've got this army of these fucking ships that are powerful enough to destroy planets. It's like this feels like someone trying to come up with their own fan fiction that contains the most powerful enemies possible, and it doesn't feel like an actual mainstream Star Wars film. I do genuinely think that even though I have a lot of fun with 9 and I enjoy it as its own thing when I watch it, it is the worst movie of that trilogy because it just feels like a fan fiction. Episode 8, I feel, actually works as a good mainstream movie. The beer is finished, and so is the video. And to say that I didn't plan what I was going to talk about going in, luckily enough, I decided to fall on Star Wars, and I have a lot to say about that, so it managed to fill the runtime. Yeah, that was an interesting one. I enjoyed discussing that. Hopefully you don't hate me for liking The Last Jedi, but that is what I think. And hopefully I've explained it enough that you can sort of understand why, and even if you don't agree, you can still sort of accept that that's my feelings on it. No need to, attack me because I don't have the same opinion as you. People are individuals. But that is time, so we will bring this to a close. We're going to cross Beck's off the poster. Whenever I do this line, it always ends up really thin compared to the other one. I try to rest the pen flat on it. There we go. But yeah, that is another beer down. Didn't talk too much about the beer in this one, but yeah, very nice. Beck's is a decent lager. If you're a fan of lagers, or if you're looking to get into lager, then I can recommend it. Again, it's one of those that I've had before, so it's one of those that when you're used to something, it's difficult to talk about it, because it's a lot easier to talk about it when you've got something new to talk about. You're tasting something that you've never tasted before, and you can talk, it's got notes of this and this, whereas where you've already tried it before, your mind just sort of skips past all that, and all you taste is familiarity. But no, very nice, good drink. Do recommend it. But we don't have time to talk about it now because the video is over. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you've been enjoying the Chronicles so far, if you have been watching them. And if you have them, thank you very much. I do genuinely appreciate you watching my videos. It is sort of the reason I put them on the internet, so that people can see them. So if you've been watching up to now, thank you very much. And even if you've just watched this video, thank you very much for that. And hopefully you'll go back and watch the others and any more that come after. And if you do want to see future videos, then subscribe to the channel to be notified on them. And if you actually want to be notified on them, then click the notification bell as well. If you like this video, then click like down below to let me know that you like it. And if you don't like the video, then do feel free to press dislike as well. And leave a comment. Let me know what your favourite Star Wars movie is, and let me know what your least favourite is, and give a little description why. And in particular, I would quite like to hear people's opinions on The Last Jedi, because I do know it is very, very divisive. So let me know your thoughts down below, but if you do, then keep it civil. People are individuals and are entitled to their own opinions, and we don't want any arguments. If someone likes a movie that you hate, then just feel happy for them that they managed to find something in it that you didn't, and they have a little bit more joy in their life. And if someone hates a movie that you love, then just feel happy that you still love it no matter what their opinion is. And if they can't feel that same way, then it's a shame for them. But that's just what it is. They don't like it, and that's fine. They're allowed to hate a movie that you love the same way that you're allowed to love a movie that they hate. There is no need for conflict. So let's keep things civil. So that is it for this video. Once again, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.